Okay, today's three biggest stories are UFC President Dana White firing shots at current bantamweight champion Aljamain Sterling, Dricus Du Plessis doubling down on his Africa comments against Israel Adesanya, and Henry Cejudo supports the idea of a PFL/UFC cross-promotional event headlined by Jon Jones and Francis Ngannou. So stick around for that story. Let's get into it. UFC President Dana White has fired shots at current bantamweight champion Aljamain Sterling in his post-fight press conference over the weekend, saying that Funkmaster is shooting himself in the foot and self-sabotaging by going on social media and saying there may be delays to his upcoming title defense against Sean O'Malley due to lingering injuries. Aljamain Sterling has had a bit of a history with injuries, having to undergo neck surgeries between the Petr Yan fights, so this news doesn't come as a shocking surprise. However, White appeared frustrated when asked about what is going on with Aljamain Sterling, following posts where Aljamain said he may not be ready for the fight in time, saying, "He's fighting. Do you want me to explain the mind of effing Aljo? I got a call from Henry Cejudo this morning saying it sounds like Aljo doesn't want to fight. Aljo is just one of those guys who can't get out of his own way." Why did he say that? I don't know. The fight is absolutely, positively on. Whilst it might seem frustrating for a promoter that one of his champions is unsure about whether he will make it to a fight card, especially one with so many eyes on it due to Sean O'Malley being involved, if Aljamain does make it to the main event of UFC 292, it will be one of the fastest turnarounds between fights for a champion in the promotion's history. If Aljamain wins in his upcoming fight against Sugar Sean O'Malley, it is likely that he will head up a division to featherweight, allowing for his teammate Merab Dvalishvili to have a crack at the bantamweight belt himself. The question that I'm not so sure about is what Aljamain does if he loses to Sean O'Malley. If he loses his belt against O'Malley, he will lose the golden ticket to run straight into a title fight against the current featherweight champion when he moves up, and it may force him to reconsider the move altogether. What do you think? Do you think Sterling will even make it to the UFC 292 main event against Sean O'Malley? And if he wins or loses, do you see him moving up a division? Let me know in the comments. The war of words is continuing between current middleweight champion Israel Adesanya and rising contender Dricus Du Plessis, this time with Dricus firing back during an interview with Submission Radio. The feud seemingly started back earlier this year when Dricus Du Plessis caused a bit of a stir when he made the comments that he would be the first African who still resides and fights out of the continent to have a championship wrapped around his waist if he were to be crowned UFC champion. These comments were seemingly aimed at the three African-born champions at the time, Israel Adesanya, Kamaru Usman, and Francis Ngannou. There was a lot of backlash initially when the comments were making the rounds on social media, with many perceiving it as an attempt to dismiss the trio's African heritage. The comments then led to a bit of a back and forth between Dricus and Adesanya, with Adesanya labeling Du Plessis as a product of colonization and a cracker, and now Dricus has doubled down on his stance in a recent interview with Submission Radio, saying, "I have never said the words more African in my life. I didn't say they were not African, I stated facts. I'm the only one in title contention ever who was born in Africa, lives in Africa, and trains here every single day. I never backpedaled. I'm sticking with that because that is the facts. I don't care how it came across." It seems to have struck a nerve with Israel Adesanya. He likes to be whatever fits him best in terms of nationality. He's referred to himself as a Kiwi, he's referred to himself as Chinese, he's referred to himself as a Nigerian. At the end of the day, he was born in Africa, he is African, but he does not reside here. That is the fact. That's what makes me and him different. My success is coming out of Africa. Dricus also put out a tweet in April that read, "So you say I haven't earned my title shot yet. Hold my beer, watch this." To which Adesanya retweeted with the words, "Please win." Dricus is slated to take on Robert Whittaker at UFC 290 in a title eliminator. Who do you see winning that matchup, and how do you think Dricus would match up against Israel Adesanya? Former doubleweight champion Henry Cejudo recently made a statement that he likes the idea of a crossover fight between the UFC and PFL headlined by Jon Jones and Francis Ngannou. Jones and Francis have been going back and forth online since Francis made the move to PFL, which seems redundant given the likelihood of the two actually fighting anytime soon. However, Jake Paul recently tweeted about his dream fights if the UFC and PFL ever work together for a cross-promotional event, saying, "Let's have PFL and UFC work together and put on a massive event on ESPN. Ngannou vs Jones, Nunes vs Harrison, Edwards vs Doumbé, and of course, Diaz vs Paul after I knock his A out in boxing." Former bantamweight and flyweight champion Henry Cejudo echoed Paul's comments and says that he liked the idea of a matchup between the two organizations, saying, "Is this the start of something cool? You know, we go back, or we think of what Jake Paul said a few days ago. He said, hey, me versus Diaz, Francis versus Jones, and I believe there is another one that made sense. But anyways, what they are trying to say is, hey, PFL versus UFC. I'll tell you what, guys, if you guys think that the UFC is the only place, the only powerhouse where the best fighters in the world are just made, guys, there's a lot of tough fighters out there. This could be a new avenue that could take MMA and take it to a whole new level. It seems highly unlikely that the UFC would entertain the idea of a cross-promotional event, especially one headlined by a former employee that they had failed negotiations with. However, if in the 1,000,000 to 1 chance it actually went ahead, who do you want to see matched up and how do you see it playing out? Do you think the UFC roster is too superior to even bother matching up against the PFL? Let me know in the comments. This week's Tweet of the Week goes to the back and forth between current bantamweight champion Aljamain Sterling and Sean O'Malley, with their several tweets aimed at each other as Aljamain tried to push to have the fight earlier, with O'Malley declining. Thanks for watching Undisputed MMA. Please hit the like and subscribe button as it really helps me grow the channel, and be sure to hit the bell notification icon to get the latest in MMA and the UFC.